Welcome to Meet the Author, where you can join in on insightful conversations with best-selling and award-winning indie published authors. Your hosts today are Rob and Joan, who themselves are indie published authors, book publicists, and paranormal investigators with Tampa Bay Spirits, based in Tampa Bay, Florida. Thanks for dropping by. And now, on with the show.
Hi, I'm Rob.
And I'm Joan. Welcome to our show. Whether you're watching this broadcast live or if you're listening to it on a podcast, we're really glad that you chose to tune into our show. We're happy to have you here.
Yes, we are. And want to remind everybody about the Voice of Indie podcast on blogtalkradio.com with Beam Weeks and Gary G's right after this show. Just hop right over. If you stay tuned to the end of this show, we run a little about a minute long ad that tells you exactly how to get over to that podcast. So join them. They talk to authors and have a great show. I'm not sure who is going to be on because this is a pre-recorded show you're watching right now.
Yeah, let me say that again. This is a pre-recorded show.
Yes. Welcome. This is episode 99. And this coming Saturday, we do have at 5:30 p.m. on Episode Rewind, it's Paul Hollis and George Dismukes, episode 68. That'll be March 11th, next Saturday. So you won't want to miss that one.
No, you have to tune in to that one because if you haven't listened to it already, there's a lot of stuff revealed.
Both of those
on that show.
Both of our guests are a real hoot.
Yes, they are.
Didn't you say? Okay.
Yes.
Now, next Wednesday, I'll be happy to say, is our episode 100 celebration. And we're kind of combined it. And it's also, we're a month into our second year now, but it's our 2-year anniversary show as well. We have several guests coming on and giveaways. So you want to make sure you tune in.
Yep.
So
swag. We have swag.
Swag. We got lots of swag.
Yeah.
We may even try our new drawing program. That's kind of fun. So I guess what we want to do now is introduce our guest. Our guest is a time traveler, actually. He's in the future. It's actually tomorrow morning where he's at. He's in Australia. And
we're really sorry that we had him get up so dang early.
It's really early where he is. So we're going to bring in Mr. Paul Rushworth Brown.
Without further ado.
Hello, Paul.
Hi, Paul. Welcome to the show.
Joan.
Hi.
Okay, and he is in Australia, so he has indicated his connection is not the best. So at times we're going to have some freezing and some voices not heard and questions
voice
repeated
delay.
And voice delays. But we're going to do our best to overcome all that, aren't we, Paul?
Yep. Australian NBN is not the best. Let me tell you.
Unfortunately, you just froze again.
Oh my goodness.
I said Australian NBN isn't the best.
There you go. There you go.
There are gremlins in the machine tonight.
That's
for
right.
sure,
I
guys.
hope the government isn't listening. That could be part of the problem.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You need to boost them up there and say they're the best.
So, Paul, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started writing?
Yeah.
Sure. So I was actually born in England. My father was born in Yorkshire in England, and he came out to Australia in the mid-50s as a 10 pound pom. Without going into it too much, that was sort of like a scheme by the Australian government to get more people to move to Australia. So they paid £10 and they invited them over to Australia, got them a job, got them a place to live, and etc. So he came out in the mid-50s, and I came out to see him in the early 80s. And he passed away about 10 years ago. And before he passed, I asked him, about sort of like our roots and where we came from, what it was like in Yorkshire, England, all that type of thing. And he really didn't know that much. So after he passed, I spent about 6 months developing a family history and traced my family back to 1590 to a small town or small village in Yorkshire called Howarth. And I traced my furthest away ancestor back to 1590. And his name was Thomas Rushworth.
That's wonderful.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, and all my ancestors lived in or about this village of Howarth, which you may know from the Bronte sisters of Wuthering Heights. They actually grew up there. And very, very small village. And all my ancestors had been living there since that time. And my great-grandfather was actually the first person to move away from Howarth down the road to Denham, which is about 10 minutes away, with his 9 children.
Wow.
Anyway, so I spent about 6 months developing this. They knew where their roots came from. So,
Okay.
And then
Just a minute. We lost all of that. So you spent
Right.
we heard up to where your great-grandfather moved away with his 9 children, just 10 miles away. And then we need to hear from there on.
And then I spent about 6 months developing a family history, and I wrote a 400-page book. I only got 500. I only got 5 copies printed, mainly for my children. Anyway, about 2 years later, prior to that, before the show started, you said you called me a time traveler, which is quite interesting. Because 2 years later, I thought to myself, this Thomas Rushworth, my great-grandfather times 10, who was he? What was his life like living on the moors of Yorkshire back in 1590 as a peasant or a copy holder? So I spent a year writing a fictionalized novel about using him as the main character. But it's not a family history, so to speak. It's more. It's a romance, historical fiction, adventure. It's tied in with the gunpowder plot that you may have heard of with Guy Fawkes and that type of thing.
Yeah.
So I basically fictionalized this life and this family with all these things that were happening in England at the time. And that's basically how I got into it.
And which book was that, Paul?
That was Skulduggery.
That was
my latest novel, Red Winter Journey, is actually sort of like the continuation.
Okay.
And that takes place in the time of the English Civil War back in 1642. And
okay, so Skulduggery, this is the one that you were talking about that goes all the way back to 1590?
1590, yeah.
Wow.
But this is the fictionalized
Yeah.
version.
Yeah.
it's not a it's definitely not a family history, even though I've used some of the names of my ancestors. I suppose much like Braveheart, if you've seen that movie.
Yeah.
So basically, what I've done is use the names of my ancestors, but built a fictionalized story that includes romance and adventure and that around those names, and it is very, 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 very descriptive.
I love historical fiction because if you read historical fiction, you learn about that history in a much more pleasant way than someone making you memorize dates and battles and things like that. I mean, that's wonderful.
And the amazing thing about it is that, it's almost like another world.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But this world actually existed.
Yeah.
And these people that I'm writing about, are my ancestors and possibly yours.
Yeah. Yeah, possibly.
That's interesting.
That's amazing. And so then the next book is this one, Red Winter Journey. And when does that take place?
So that takes place in 1642, and it takes place in the time of the English Civil War, but it's not a war book. It's more about a story of a father's love for his son.
That's wonderful. Does it follow the same people, the same family? Is it the same family 100 years?
Next generation.
The next generation.
Cool.
That's great. I think that's more time frame that I'm used to, the 1600s, but the 1500s, even though it's 1590, I'm kind of like, all right, I'm a little lost. So I would really like to read that.
Yeah, well, there's very, very few books written in that time frame. And 1590, that used to like going back to the feudal system.
Right.
Lords and ladies and peasants working on land owned by the lord of the manor. And all that type of thing is taking place. And people are living in
Wow.
I think we're frozen.
Small, living in a cottage with. Sorry. So all this type of thing takes place on the moors of Yorkshire, where people under the feudal system are tenanting land owned by the lord of the manor, and they're actually living in cottages, and their animals are brought into the cottage late at night.
Wow. And that was
there's
life.
Yeah, and there's obviously no running water. There's skullduggery and shenanigans, and my ancestors were a real rough lot. They were rough, they were hardy. They worked hard, they played hard, talking about time travel. For me, writing Skulduggery and Red Winter Journey, it was like me stepping back in time to do the research.
Right.
But all of our ancestors at that time lived rough. I don't imagine many of us had ancestors as Lord of the Manor.
Well, through my research, 85% of our ancestors in the Western world were peasants.
Well, of course.
So the story is about real people.
Right. I always say you can tell from my body structure that I come from good Irish peasant stock. I was built to work out in the field.
Yeah.
Have babies out in the field while I'm working.
Yep.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, they had like a 10-acre. They tenanted a 10-acre plot of land from. I actually found a manor roll, a manor court roll, and my great grandfather times 10. His name was actually on that manor roll.
Wow.
And because I wrote away to Keithley Library, and he was something called a copy holder, right? Which is basically under the feudal system which was basically a peasant farmer that had to 10 acres of land for Lord Birkhead, and in return he would have to work 3 days out of the week on Lord Birkhead's land.
Okay.
For free, basically to sort of like so that he could have that 10 acres.
All right. So that was his payment, was working on the Lord's 3 acres.
No. So he had 10 acres.
Yeah.
But the Lord had, maybe 100 acres.
You're
and
right.
he would have to spend 3 days.
Oh, 3 days working on his. I gotcha.
Yeah, 3 days.
I can't imagine it was easy labor either.
No. Tough times, tough
Really?
weather. I mean, I went to. I actually know exactly where Thomas Rushworth, my great grandfather times 10, where he actually lived. And to do research, I actually went over there a few years ago, and we went in summer. My wife and I, Claire, went over there in summer, and I tell you something. I don't know how they survived. Really freezing. The wind
In
just
summer.
was like a knife cut through. Beg your pardon?
Wow. In the summer.
Yeah.
In the
In
summer,
summer.
it was freezing.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's
Yeah, you have to be tough to survive that.
right.
Yeah.
That's why they had 9 kids.
Yeah.
So some of them will survive to go on.
Yeah.
Seriously. I mean,
So yeah, as I say, it was like stepping back in time for me doing the research, and it took. Originally I self-published the novel, and then Shawline Publishing loved the idea of it and picked it up, and so they re-released it. And they're my publisher now. I've got a third novel coming out in November called Dream of Courage. But
when does that take place?
That's actually the next generation.
Okay. So
But it goes away from the main family, and it goes away from it's. I suppose how can I say? It's more spread out. It takes place in the shambles in Leeds, and it's more around that time there was highwaymen, there was pirates, there was and it Dream of Courage is more about a novel about 2 brothers or sons, cousins of my great grandfather that leave Howarth and go to Leeds, which is obviously a major city, to basically earn their fortune to get the family out of poverty. But they get tied up with the wrong people, and once again, it's a love story. I've got to be careful because I don't want to give any spoilers away.
no spoilers.
No.
Yeah, it's a love story. There's a lot of it takes place on the sea. There's pirates. There's a very crude and awful man by the name of Jacob Wilding that I won't go into. And once again, it's throats and thieves and all that type of thing. But one thing I'm really known for is the twists and turns in my novels.
Good.
Okay.
So, and I love that. I love the twists and turns.
Those
I
are
do
the
too.
book I like. So.
They're the kind I like too. I want to know. Twists and turns.
And it's Skulduggery is basically a whodunit.
Good.
Okay.
The first novel, Skulduggery, is a whodunit.
That
Excellent.
Sounds really good.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we need to take our first break now. And when we come back, we've
We
still
need
got
a-
a lot ahead of us. We've got Paul's going to read a passage. And also we're going to do our book giveaway and learn about some more about what Paul's up to here. Okay, so we need to have a word from our sponsors right now. Don't go away, folks.
We'll be right back.
They thought the siren was dead. In the novel, Siren Song, by author George Dismukes, James Harmon shot her twice. Several people saw her dead body sinking slowly into the abyss. But now, in Siren Song 2, evidence suggests that she may still be alive.
She killed that boatload of people. It was her! And she's just getting started!
Angie, that's impossible.
The cold chill up my spine tells me it's not impossible. We've got to start all over again. And this time, do it right.
Siren Song 2. The story continues. Available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and many other bookseller websites. Get your copy today.
Mystery hovers in the Magnolia Bluff Public Library. It has nothing to do with the hundreds of suspense novels on its shelves. Caroline McCluskey is the librarian. She finds a crimson hat and a black and white poodle puppy. They belong to Esther Williams. Esther is missing. The police can't find her. Neither can the FBI. Esther's only hope is a ring of 3 women investigators who form the Round Table. The Round Table has already solved one mystery in town, but this time, a woman's life is at stake. The Doggone Diamond Dilemma is now available on Amazon.
It's a murder scene. Like many others, except the prime suspect is a beautiful woman from Detective Ray Schiller's past. Ray is determined to help her, but at what cost? Targeting him for his interference, the killer threatens all Ray holds dear. He's given terms and a deadline he can't possibly meet. Run, Ray, run. Watch the past come back with a vengeance in Targeted. Don't miss a second. Order now.
And we're back.
Welcome back, everybody. Okay, now, Paul, I'm going to ask you some questions that I know our audience always wants to know. Okay, the first one is, are you a pantser? Do you understand that term? Do you have it in Australia?
Pantser?
Yeah. Okay. So do you do a full outline, or do you just kind of go with the flow when you write?
Oh, I don't plan anything. I just write.
You're a pantser.
Okay. You fly by the seat of your pants.
You fly by the seat of your pants and you write it. Yeah. Okay. And also, I know.
Okay. I find is that.
Yeah,
What I find is if I don't plan anything. Oh, sorry, Joan.
Oh, I was just going to say we're pantsers too. Well, we're kind of a hybrid. You have to do some planning, right? You have to. If we don't keep track, you don't keep track of who your characters are, you lose it along the way, and you don't want to change their names in the middle of the book. That's not a good thing. So.
Never good.
But the other thing I was going to ask, and the other thing that I know that they are always interested in knowing is, which are you more happy with, being published, or were you happier with being an indie author?
I think there's sort of like benefits to both. I mean, the number of indie authors obviously is increasing. The number of novelists and books out there to read a huge. So I think sometimes that makes it a little bit difficult because the market is so huge. I think being a historical fiction author, I suppose the genre isn't as popular as, say, crime or fantasy these days. But what I tend to do is try to mix a little bit of fantasy and a little bit of romance and crime and mystery and that into my historical novels. So it caters for people who like those genres. But being a published author, yeah, look, I mean, it's great. It's you've got to get your name out there, and it takes a long time, as you would know. It takes a long time to get your name out there and to read a base. That's probably taken me, a good probably about 3 years before my novels actually became popular enough for people to actually purchase and enjoy.
Yeah, it takes a while. And even as a published author, you have to get out there yourself and you have to promote yourself. And I think that's the most difficult thing for most authors when they first start writing, is realizing how much self-promotion there really is,
And self-promotion and marketing. I mean, really, writing the novel is the easy part.
That's right. That's right. It's the marketing hard. That kills you. Yeah, it is hard.
And a bottomless pit.
The rewrites are hard. I know. We our 10-year-old, our 10-year-old grandson is writing a book. And you wouldn't believe his dialogue. It is amazing. I told him we're going to have him go over our dialogue and edit our books because he does it so well.
That's amazing.
There's no he said, she said. It's always was shocked or asked questioningly. And I'm like, that is so good.
Where are you getting that stuff?
But we told him, we said, all right, so because he asked us to edit his book. We said, all right, we're going to edit this. And you're going to have to rewrite it. And we're going to do this more than once. And it doesn't mean your book is bad. It's just you have to keep working at it, and you do. And then by the time you finish the book, you're sorry you ever started it.
Well, when I first wrote Skulduggery, and after Shawline Publishing picked it up, I had a year between when I signed the contract with Shawline Publishing and when they actually released Skulduggery. So I went right back through it and basically didn't rewrite it. The story was pretty much the same, but originally I wanted the novel to be as authentic as possible. So there was a little bit of Yorkshire dialect in there. Oh. And when I went back through it in that year, you learn, I mean, as you would know, you learn so much as an author over a period of sort of like 3 or 4 years. You learn so much.
Yeah.
You identify words that you use too much. Yeah. Obviously, you want to limit those hang-ons and all that type of thing. But also, I add a dialect in there because rereading it as a reader, I felt that there was too much, and it would be too difficult for the wider international audience.
Yeah.
So now Skulduggery is actually being translated into Russian.
Cool.
And into Hindi in India. For some reason, Indians just love English historical fiction.
Indians love to watch this podcast.
Really?
Oh yeah. Yep. We have a large Indian audience. Like we said, we've got a worldwide audience, but we also did Russia until Ukraine started, and I think they're still blocking the internet. The flow, So, but we did have quite a few Russian listeners also. But it's amazing. But that's great that they can read it in their own language. And
it's I've got a translator doing it, but and when she's doing it, it's quite interesting. She'll sort of like read the English version and translate it, and some of the words, old English words, like and I've actually got a glossary at the beginning of the novel, because I like to, as I say, keep it as authentic as possible. But there'd be words such as shiv, which is a knife, or pottage, which is a meal that was very, very popular back in the 16th century with peasants, and it was basically just a vegetable stew. So I have to put because I want to use those words, I have to put a glossary at the beginning of the book, so readers can actually go back and
they can look it up,
find out. Yeah,
that's interesting.
And it's interesting. Say, for instance, a cruck house, which is sort of like a very, very small cottage made of wattle and which is sort of like translated. A cruck house was a tent. I said, no, it's not a tent. It's like almost like a stick house made with clay. And she, oh, right, okay. So she has to sort of like make all those types of changes.
Yeah.
In the translation.
Not easy, I don't think. Well, let us bring up where people can find you when they want to get in touch with you. All right. So Paul's website is Paul Rushworth Brown, Skulduggery, winterofred.com. And I am going to spell this time, but next time you're going to have to listen.
On your own. Yeah.
So that's
a long domain.
Yeah. Well, Skulduggery and Winter of Red. Pay attention, folks. All right. It's PAULRUSHWORTHBROWN.com. So, in other words, it's his name, Paul Rushworth Brown, and then the name of both of the books that he has published right now, Skulduggery and Winter of Red. That's easy, people. Then there is Facebook, is Paul Rushworth Brown author. Y'all know how to spell author. There's Twitter at Brown9Paul. LinkedIn is Paul Rushworth Brown, or hyphen if you are used to hyphen instead of dash, just insert that. Instagram, Paul Brown 630. And finally, the important one for those of you who want to enter the book giveaway is his email, paulbrown630@gmail.com. I should say 630. It's actually 630, right. Not an O. So please don't put in an O in his Instagram account or his email, because it's actually a 0. I should make that clear.
Okay. Let's go ahead and do the book giveaway.
I agree.
And then maybe Paul can read his passage.
Yeah, that would be great.
Book giveaway. Everybody get ready and type to this email. For the first 5 people to email paulbrown630@gmail.com will win an ebook copy of Red Winter Journey and Skulduggery.
Both people, both. He's being really generous.
Very generous, yes.
And giving away 5 copies of both of them. So
even if you're listening to this audio and you're not watching us live, go ahead and send him the email.
You never know.
paulbrown630@gmail.com. There may be leftover copies that need to be to find a home, and he'll be happy to give them away, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that people can read his book.
Right.
Can we enter?
Let's do it.
I'll send you guys a copy.
I'll be right back. I got to go into them. No.
Yeah. I really want to read these books. They sound really fascinating. I love historical historical fiction.
So would you like to read a passage for us?
Which book are you going to read from?
So I'm going to read a passage from Red Winter Journey.
All righty.
Okay.
And I'll just read the back of the back of the book first, just to give sort of like an idea of what the book's actually about. And as I say, the book is, even though it's set in the time of the English Civil War, it's more about a love of a father for his son, and he has to go on a journey. All right. So it's a historic journey of twists and adventure with a dash of spirited passion. A tale of a peasant family caught in the ravages of the English Civil War in 1642. A young man, Tommy Rushworth, tries to stay alive after being conscripted into the Parliamentary Army and taken off to war. Thomas Rushworth Sr. is racing against time to save his son from imminent death in a war he wanted no part of. Back in Haworth, Tommy's mother despairs, awaiting news of the fate of her son and husband. Through the turmoil and suffering, William and Lucy develop their own love story and are tested to the limit by the persecution of the steward of the manor, who conspires to sabotage their future. The bloody hell of war and the saga of family tribulations drive this period drama with exceptional narrative and factual accuracy of the talented author who penned Skulduggery and is becoming one of Australia's established new authors. A dark and dramatic prose of family and war that brings a realism of history to the imagination with little effort. A great read. So I'm going to read a few pages from chapter 3, which is called Coming of Age. The king had introduced unfair taxes, and you guys probably didn't learn anything about the English Civil War. Do you want me to give you a little bit of a background on just quickly about what the English Civil War was about?
Sure. Believe it or not, we did learn a lot of stuff about English, but go ahead and refresh everybody's mind. We've learned about
this was like such an important time in not only Western politics and social development, because basically what happened is King Charles I, who was actually beheaded. It's such an important time. I'm amazed that more movies and books haven't been written about it. So anyway, King Charles wanted divine right. In other words, he wanted to run things. And the people of England didn't like that. So the Parliament basically went against him. There was a war between King Charles and Parliament. And you may have heard of Cromwell. And he basically was sort of like the person leading the Parliamentary Army. And when King Charles when the Parliamentary Army won the war, England became a republic, believe it or not. And King Charles was beheaded. The monarchy was beheaded. And Cromwell actually became the leader of England for a number of years until King Charles's son who was in exile, was brought back to England, and then the monarchy was established again a few years later. Right, but the English Civil War, more people died in that English Civil War than both World War I and World War II put together.
That's because they were all English.
Well, I mean, a lot of them died from disease.
The same with our Civil War. More people died in our Civil War because we were fighting each other.
Yeah. So the chapter 3 is called Coming of Age. So the king had introduced unfair taxes, and the anti-crown sentiment was beginning to grow all around the country. In the West, they hoped that they would be protected from the threat of coming hostilities due to their remoteness. Tommy had watched as many of the young men of the village packed up and left to join the army. At least fighting for Cromwell, they were guaranteed an income to send home to their families and put food in their bellies. Tommy once considered joining them, but wouldn't contemplate leaving his mother and father alone and destitute to the ravages of the winter on the moors. "Here you are, Tommy," said Isabel, as she brought a much older Tommy Rushworth out of his thoughts by placing a bowl of pottage and dark bread on the table. Now a grown man, Tommy had the look of his father. Thick dark brown eyes of brown hair peeped from under his brown felt cap. His reddish windburned face gave him the rugged look of a Yorkshireman. In the spring and summer, he worked the field from early morning to night, and his hands were rough and callous like roughly shorn timber. His skin had been aged slightly by hardship and the Pennine wind and summer rain. He wore a loose dark brown sleeveless jerkin over an open grey dirty tunic with dark brown hose and woolen foot coverings strapped with leather that had spent far too much time in the mud. The sleeveless jerkin kept the draught and coldness from his back, and a cloth hood dangled loosely, which when required shielded part of his face from the punishing icy wind. What were you in such deep thought about, husband? Isabel inquired as she sat down on the stool next to the fire. Isabel knew when her man was out of sorts and knew to leave him be when something was troubling him. He had a quiet strength like his father, and the nut didn't fall far from the tree, she thought. He wasn't openly affectionate, but he was honest and good to her. He could always be trusted and didn't spend coin on whores or the dog fighting at the tavern like some in the village. It was only underneath the blanket at night that his whisperings became quiet and loving. Just thinking about times gone by, Tommy put his head closer to the bowl. He spooned some pottage into his mouth, wiping the excess with the sleeve of his grey linen shirt, which poked out of his tunic. The wind howled outside like a wild beast, and a small line of snow blew under the door and started to gather in a small mound. The shutters vibrated stubbornly, keeping the wind and snow outside. Still, a steady drip of water melted by the warmth of the fire dripped from the ledge beneath the shutter. What made you think of the past? Isabel asked as she turned to stoke the fire, knowing not to press him too hard on the subject. Just thinking about Father and William and how they were when Nan Marjorie passed. The cottage was poorly ventilated except for the shutters, which they couldn't open at night, and 2 slits in the wall in front of the animal stalls. Steam from the body heat of the cow and ox rose and dissipated among the wheeled vegetables, and the boar grifted through old peelings and rotten cabbage leaves from the collection of autumn leftovers. Agnes heard her son's melancholy words as she eavesdropped from the animal quarters at the back corner of the cottage. She shoveled manure through the hole in the wall designed for the purpose and closed the hatch to keep the weather outside. Putting her hands together, she blew on them, then rubbed them together to get the circulation back. This draught will be the end of me, she grumbled to herself. I wonder when your father will be back, said Agnes, as she walked toward the fire to warm herself, lifting her kirtle to warm her feet. Where's he gone, Mother? Tommy asked curiously. Gone into the village with John Hargreaves to talk to the reeve about something. About what? Tommy, you know he tells me now about his plans and goings on. Have you not learnt that yet? I have, knowing that he kept specific details from Isabel in the same way. Isabel walked over to the spinning wheel and sat down on the stool in front of it. She took some waste yarn around the bobbin, fed it through the flyer and tied it to a 6-inch roving. She pumped the treadle and at the same time gently fed out the fibres by pulling lightly to keep it taut. In the winter, there wasn't much to do in the fields, so their days were spent spinning yarn and a never-ending weaving of cloth. It was a tedious process, and it took them almost a week to make one kersey, which was then sold back to the clothier. Isabel turned to her husband curiously before walking to the hearth of the fire to stir the pottage. And you, husband, is there any secrets that you should be telling me? Tommy stayed quiet, as he didn't want to scare her with stories of what he had heard at the King's Arms about what was coming, and took another spoonful of pottage. Isabel knew not to push the subject, as she teased more of the fleece. Agnes smiled at his restraint, just like his father, she thought to herself, as she climbed up the steps of the ladder, being careful not to trip on the bottom of her kirtle. She climbed and fled, flapping their terror. Loose feathers rose and then floated slowly to the ground. Carefully climbing down, she separated the hay and threw it into the trough in front of the animals. A rickety old worn-out structure with vertical wooden strips of timber denied full access to separate the hay so that each had their own portion. She walked out of the animal enclosure and over to the fire. Isabel, you take a load off. I'll do that. You need to rest, and so does your baby. Baby's fine, Agnes, kicking like a young lamb, she said as she placed her hands under the bowls and straightened, grimacing from the dull ache in her lower back. She sat down at the table. You just tell me when you want me to stop.
Okay, just finish that, and then we can take a break. Go ahead.
Sorry?
Okay, you can just finish what you're reading there, and then it'll be time to take our break. But
sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
She sat down at the table opposite Tommy while Agnes placed a bowl in front of her and Lucy, who was almost 6 months pregnant. I put some extra meat in the pottage for the baby, said Agnes. Oh, there's no need. Spring is still a long way off and we need to make it last. Never you mind that. If we run out, Thomas will just have to butcher another pig. Baby needs to be strong and healthy. Isabel was pretty. Dark hair drops to just above her eyebrows with a fringe. She had kind, dark eyes which sparkled with light from the fire. The continual rosiness of the cheeks gave her a healthy glow. Her blue kirtle and tan partlet had a plunging neckline which joined with the open-fronted gown, which was laced across her chest with a leather cord. The shapeless sleeves were attached to the dress with string stitches at the top of the shoulder. A fawn linen apron, dirtied and stained, ballooned out from her lower abdomen and dropped to the floor. Tommy looked at Isabel as she sat down at the table and smiled. She was a good woman, Tommy thought to herself, and had settled into life at the cottage well. She worked hard and did her share of the cooking, mending and spinning. It had been some years since they had met in Stanbury, and even though they only saw each other for a couple of hours in the evening in summer, he cherished her, even though he would never let on. The courtship was short, and her father had refused Tommy's advances towards his daughters. Years earlier, Isabel's mother had died trying to give birth to her younger brother, something that her father never really got over. Now he was alone, and although Tommy knew she felt guilty leaving him, she knew it was for the best. The wedding took place in Stanbury, and when the Rushworth family left, they took Isabel back to Haworth with them.
That is wonderful.
Later that night,
I'd like to ask you a couple of questions. Okay, so
sure.
Number one, obviously, so then the households there were multi-generational, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's...
So it was a very small cottage, and there was sort of like probably about 10 people living there.
And the other question that I had was, is Rushworth your mother's side? Is that your maternal heritage or?
Paternal, father's side.
That's your father's side. And Brown is your mother's side? No?
Actually, Brown is my father's side as well.
Okay, so it's Rushworth Brown from your dad.
Yeah. So Rushworth is actually my ancestral name.
Very nice. I like it.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Well, we need to take this moment here to
Little
hear
break.
from our sponsors,
Yes.
and then we'll come back and finish up. So stand by. Don't go away, folks.
People who like to read want to get their hands on books by Becca Jones.
Becca Jones, the breakthrough author who tells it like it is. It takes courage to tell a story when it reveals dark secrets. Becca Jones delves deep into the hidden world of sexual abuse. She tells what happened and also tells how she survived.
Meant to Be is much more than just entertaining. Meant to Be gives you a point of reference, hope to cling to, and becomes a guide for survival if you have suffered the same thing. Meant to Be, Becca Jones, a must-have.
Meant to Be is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and many other bookseller websites.
First, there was Siren Song. Then Siren Song 2. Now comes The Siren Hunter, a continuing saga about Angie Holland and her never-ending battle with the mythological denizens that are not even supposed to exist. Is The Siren Hunter a conclusion to the undersea horror? Only the sirens know for sure.
The Siren Hunter, now available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and many other bookseller websites. Or contact this podcast. The trilogy is complete.
Madison Jackson loved being a cop. A young girl is raped and murdered near Burnett Reservoir. Madison vows to get justice for the child. Madison travels to the heart of Mexican cartel country. She is kidnapped, tortured. Will Madison ever make it home? Justice by Kelly Marshall, only at Amazon.com.
And we're back again.
Welcome back. So sorry about the dog interruption. There was either a delivery or she was barking at the storm. A storm has come in while we've been sitting here.
Really?
We did have a beautiful day when we started.
It's blue skies here in Sydney.
It's thundering and raining in Tampa Bay, Florida. Well, that was, go ahead.
You'd be in winter now, wouldn't you? We're in summer.
Yeah.
Well, we're in winter, but was 86 degrees out the last time. Oh, and I don't know what that is.
Are you Celsius or Fahrenheit?
Celsius.
Yeah,
You're
I don't know what
Celsius,
that is in Celsius, but it's hot.
Yeah. It'd be sort of like 30 degrees Celsius.
We're always hot here in Tampa because we're subtropical. So, we have a hurricane season, but we don't have a cold season.
I've actually got quite a few followers down in Florida.
Oh, yeah? Where in Florida? Do you know?
No, I don't.
Somewhere.
Yeah, but they contact me on Facebook quite often.
Oh, good.
That's good.
Tell them about the show. They can tune in. They now usually on our show, when our show is live, people can comment and ask questions. But go ahead and comment on our Indie Book Source. Well, actually, it's Meet the Author Podcast YouTube, and we'll make sure that we forward those questions in those comments to Paul so that he knows, and that way he can answer you. But it's good for them to be able to see your face and learn a little bit more about you other than just what they read in your books. So
the story behind the stories.
The story behind the stories, yeah.
This ugly mug.
So when does Dream of Courage come out?
It comes out in, it was going to come out in April, but they've decided to release it just prior to Christmas in November.
Oh,
November.
Way off.
So
okay.
it's,
all right.
Yeah. People have to wait a while to get book number 3.
Yeah,
and this is
so exciting. I wanted to come out earlier.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
I don't blame you there. It's a long wait.
Yeah.
But 17, what is it now? What year does that take place?
It would be sort of like the beginning of the 18th century.
Okay.
So
All
early
right.
1700s.
Early 1700s. And these are cousins of Tom that we just heard about. Yeah. And what they do. It's so exciting, and you'll never see the ending coming. Okay. Nothing like a good. I really like to have my brain teased and try and figure out things, and I'm always disappointed when I can. Like there's nothing worse than when you start reading a book or watching a movie and you already know who done it. You're like, that was easy.
And the great thing, I think, we were talking about planning and that before. The great thing about not planning is that you can sort of like once you finish a novel, you can sort of like swap and change things, and put sort of like little twists and turns in there that people. Sorry, you probably missed that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was saying that's a great thing about not planning, is the fact that you can sort of like put twists and turns in there that people won't see coming, and I just love that. I just love that, reading novels that have twists and turns in it, and you basically just think to yourself, I didn't see that coming, Where did that
Yeah.
come from? Yeah.
Right.
I love that. I really do.
So on Red Winter Journey, does your background that you have behind you today, does that have anything to do with the book, or is that just...
Yeah, because it takes place in the winter time.
Okay.
In Yorkshire, so that would have been sort of like that's what it would have looked like in Yorkshire in winter. So
I can't even imagine.
No.
And those, you can see sort of like the dry stone walls. So those in the feudal system, most of the lands were sort of like open, and people could sort of like, there was a common green, and people could share them basically. But as time went on, lords of because this was in the time of the development of the English wool industry, which was obviously a very a strong part of the English economy at the time, and a lot of the wool industry was carried out by people like my family, and it was called the put-out system. So they would sort of like have a few sheep, or they would get sheep, and they'd get wool, and clothiers would drop it off to these families. The families would turn it into yarn, then turn it into cloth, and then basically sell it back to the clothier for a sum, and that's basically how they made money.
Oh,
But interestingly, when this occurs in Red Winter Journey, when they started to put dry walls up and cordon off fields, the quality of the wool dropped. So that was sort of like one of the reasons why the English economy just did a nosedive, basically. At the
Interesting.
time.
They did better free range.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So who owned the sheep?
Usually what would happen is the lord of the manor, would own most of the sheep, right? But each family would have sort of like maybe 10 sheep on their small acreage that they didn't own. And usually the poor people, they grew barley because they couldn't afford more expensive grains. So they grew barley. They'd usually have a couple of sheep, and then they'd have sort of like a small vegetable garden. They usually weren't allowed to hunt on the lord's in the lord's forests, but they would snare rabbits and that type of thing.
Right. And I don't imagine they could eat their sheep, huh? Until they got really old.
Yeah, too expensive.
Yeah.
These people were living on, subsistence living.
Yeah. When my family came over here, it was because of the Great Potato Famine.
Yeah.
So that was really bad. They were all subsisting on grass. They would send the kids out to eat grass and send them down over the cliffs of Moher to get
that's what
mussels.
we did with our kids.
Yeah.
Oh, no, we didn't.
We have a lot of kids.
And when you think about it, at that time, obviously there was no running water, so they might have to like travel, a kilometer, 2 kilometers to bring back a bucket of water to the cottage. But then they couldn't drink. Then they couldn't drink it because usually it was so filthy from toilet waste and that type of thing. So what they do is that's why they had to drink ale. They turned the water into ale.
Wow.
Interesting.
That is interesting.
So you had sort of like like 6-year-old, 7-year-old kids drinking ale.
Yeah. Well, they had to live, survive, right? Yeah. And not die of dysentery or something from.
Well, that was a real problem. I mean,
sure.
the life expectancy in around Howth 40. Sorry, did you get that?
No.
Just missed that.
The
No,
life expectancy was...
Yeah, the life expectancy in Howth around that time was about 35.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, wow.
When did they start having children?
Well, usually between 17 and 20.
So you don't get to see your kids grow up.
No, and there was a lot of consumption. There's a lot of obviously whooping cough.
Yeah.
So a lot of babies died before the age of 6.
Yeah, that's really hard.
And it's like the cleanliness. There was no toilets. So basically, the cows and the animals were living inside where they lived. Excuse me. So yeah, it was a very I suppose unhealthy environment that people lived in.
And think about what we complain about.
First world problems. The internet doesn't work properly.
First world problems is right. I don't like my bed. It's not comfortable. You go to bed.
Yeah.
The gas price went up 2 cents.
Yeah.
How sad.
Yeah.
Well,
so it's very interesting. Very interesting. As I say, it was for me researching it, and I researched it using scientific databases, basically.
Yeah.
So it's very, very accurate. And when people read Red Winter Journey or Skulduggery, they think, oh my God, is that how people lived?
Yeah. Yeah. And like you said, we can all think, all right, that's how my ancestors lived.
Yeah.
Because really, I can tell you my family didn't come from royalty.
It was interesting. I was interviewed by Beth Worsdale over in the US, and what I did was I had 2 other to ask me questions. Sorry, you missed that, didn't you?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I did another interview, and 2 other readers that had read Red Winter Journey came on the show, right? And they were just amazed. People actually lived with their animals. Yeah. Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
No, thank you. Well, we live with our dog, and she's very noisy, but she doesn't do anything in the house that she's not supposed to do in the house. So
she is trained.
She's hospital.
Yeah. So I mean, it was really I was really undecided what to read out of Red Winter Journey. Obviously, reading a couple of pages, you really don't get to fully sort of like understand the story, but there are sort of like quite a few bold hooks in there, and you are kept intrigued from the beginning with the hooks.
Excellent.
So
excellent.
Before we close, after Dream of Courage, do you have anything else on the drawing board yet?
Yeah, I've actually started a book called The 10-Pound Pom. Sorry, the 10-Pound Tourist.
Oh,
okay.
Right,
so you're probably not aware, but back in the 50s, a lot of English people, through that scheme that I was telling you about, came to Australia, and they were sort of like sent off to different parts of the outback, which is sort of like out in the middle of sort of like central Australia, where there's huge sort of like sheep stations and very little water. And you imagine a young man like my father coming from a place like Yorkshire, like in the background here, and being sent out to sort of like central Australia, excuse me, in the bush, where it sort of like gets up to 40 degrees sometimes. 40 degrees Celsius. So that would be sort of like, over 100.
Hot, really hot.
And flies. People don't realize the flies. I'm probably not doing a good job of advertising Australia as a place to go on holiday. But
come to Australia.
I don't think anyone ever thinks, oh, I want to go to the outback in Australia. We have read about it here in the United States. They want to go to the beach.
Yeah.
What's that really famous beach? What do they call it? Oh.
Bondi Beach.
Bondi. Yes, yeah. Bondi. Everybody wants to go there. That's where they want to go. They want to go to Bondi, and they want to
go to Sydney,
swim with dolphins. Yeah, see the Opera House. That's what they want to do.
Yeah, all up the coast is, and even in the outback is beautiful.
Yeah.
You've got Uluru, the Olgas. You've got some amazing, some like scenery in that I don't think you can compare to it anywhere else in the world.
Right. It's reminiscent of like Arizona and Utah here in the United States.
Right. Yeah.
It's red rock and it's desert and it's mountains.
Arches and rocks.
And
piles of rocks. Yeah. Piles of rocks.
Yeah.
Cactus.
So sorry, I don't think I finished answering your question. Yeah. So this new novel is going to be about, because I wanted to bring a little bit of Australiana into one of my novels, and so this is the 10-pound tourist is going to be a story about a young man that spends 3 weeks on a boat coming from Yorkshire to Australia, and sort of like the adventure that he sort of like goes through, working and living out in the outback on a sheep farm, basically. And then once again, there'll be sort of like a bit of mystery, a bit of romance, twists and turns, a whodunit, all that type of thing in there.
Cool. Well, that's something to look forward to.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see what comes after that book, your 5th book. It'll be fun to see what you decide to do.
Well, with inflation, it'll probably be the 20-pound tours.
Yeah. I reckon I've got about 10 books in me.
Good.
Okay, cool.
Good. So we have a lot to look forward to.
Yes, we do. Yeah. Well, we want to thank you for joining us tonight, and look forward to all the good books ahead, and look forward to actually reading your books. That would be awesome. And do you have anything else you want to ask?
I want to say...
I can't thank you enough.
Oh, you're welcome.
It's our pleasure.
Yes. Thank you for being on the show. And what I would like to say is if you read a book, please leave a review and tell people what you liked about it, so that they can say, oh, I like books like that too. And they can read it.
Right.
That's it.
There you go. Okay. So Paul, we're going to move you over to the side. Let's see. We're going to do this. You just stay right where you're at, and we're going to close the show and just stay right there, and we'll come back to you, and then we'll be off the air at that point backstage. But what we want to do is to encourage everybody to join us next week for our episode 100 celebration and our 2-year anniversary combined. All sorts of guests and giveaways. It's going to be fun. That's
swag.
Next Wednesday.
There'll be swag.
Yes, and that will be on, what's the date? 15th, I think. March 15th. So we're looking forward to it.
Yes.
And stay tuned for the Voice of Indie podcast. The instructions on how to get there will be on here in just a second. So until next time.
That's all, folks.
Good night.
Good night.
Live every Wednesday, your Voice of Indie hosts Beam Weeks and Stephen Gees welcome authors, musicians, publishing industry pros, artists, and assorted creative guests for an exciting interactive hour. Call in during the show or post questions and comments on Twitter for responses in real time. Meet your favorite indie creators, learn inside tips, network, and promote your work. The link for each week's show is pinned on Twitter atop @VoiceOfIndie. And you can receive the link every Wednesday morning in your inbox by subscribing to our newsletter at freshinkgroup.com. Check out Voice of Indie every Wednesday on Blog Talk Radio and catch hundreds of episodes archived everywhere from our websites to our YouTube channel and Spotify.
Thank you for joining us here on Meet the Author. Make sure you stay up to date with our show by clicking like, follow, and share. And you can find us on Spotify, iTunes, and more. See you next time on WLFE-DB.com.
You've been listening to WLFE-DB.com, where our shows are your shows.